At 66 years old, Marty Stuart has finally decided to open up about the one subject he's kept close to his heart for decades: his wife, country music legend Connie Smith. Their story has been one of Nashville's most whispered about romances, a tale that began as a boyhood dream and grew into a lifelong partnership. Fans have speculated for years about how it all started, why it worked despite the odds, and what really happened behind the curtain of fame. Marty has always smiled when her name came up, offering kind words, but never revealing the deeper truths until now. And what he shares isn't just about love, it's about fate, patience, and the belief that some connections are written long before they happen. Behind the music, the awards, and the public appearances lies a journey that almost never came to be, a journey that's as remarkable as the songs they sing. Marty Stuart's life was built on a foundation of music long before the world knew his name. Growing up in the small town of Philadelphia, Mississippi, his earliest memories were filled with the sound of gospel harmonies, bluegrass banjos, and the timeless twang of country greats. By the age of 12, he wasn't just dreaming about the Grand Ole Opry. He was studying every detail, every performer, every note, like his future depended on it. That same year, his life took a turn that would shape everything that followed. On a trip to Nashville, Marty found himself backstage at the Opry, surrounded by the legends he'd admired from his family's record collection. And that's when he saw her, Connie Smith. She wasn't just a star, she was the star. Her voice had a warmth that wrapped around you like an embrace, and her stage presence was so magnetic it made the rest of the world blur away. Marty wasn't like the other kids in the crowd that night. He didn't just see a celebrity, he saw the woman he believed he was destined to marry. It was a thought so bold, so unlikely, that he didn't dare speak it aloud to anyone but a few close friends and family. They laughed, of course. How could a 12-year-old possibly know such a thing? But Marty knew. That moment planted a seed deep within him, and from then on, every step he took in his music career, every note he played, every mile he traveled on the road, it was all, in some way, leading back to her. What he didn't know was that fate would keep them in separate orbits for years, allowing him to grow from a wide-eyed boy into the kind of man who might one day have a chance to stand beside her. And yet, even as he toured with Lester Flatt, later joined Johnny Cash's band, and carved out his own place in Nashville, the image of that night at the Opry and the woman who had captivated him never once left his mind. By the time Marty first laid eyes on her backstage at the Opry, Connie Smith was already a living legend. In 1964, her debut single, Once a Day, didn't just top the country charts. It made history by staying there for 8 straight weeks, an achievement no other female country artist had ever matched at the time. She was hailed as one of the most naturally gifted vocalists Nashville had ever seen, her tone pure as crystal, and her delivery steeped in emotion. But while the world saw a glamorous star draped in sequins and bathed in spotlight, Connie's personal life was far from perfect. Away from the stage, she was a woman navigating the demands of fame, multiple marriages, and raising 5 children. Her deep Christian faith became her anchor, and by the late 70s, she chose to step away from the industry at the height of her success to focus on her family and church life. It was a decision that left fans longing for her return, but for Connie, it was a matter of survival. Music could wait, but her children could not. During those years, she was rarely seen in the Nashville social scene, adding to her aura of mystery. When she eventually made her way back into the spotlight in the mid-1980s, she was no longer the wide-eyed young singer the industry first embraced. She was a woman who had weathered storms, who carried wisdom and caution in equal measure. To Marty, who by then had climbed the ranks of country music and earned his own respect as a prodigy turned professional, she was even more captivating than before. She wasn't just a voice, she was a story, a life, a strength that drew him in even deeper. And while she greeted him as a fellow musician, smiling warmly, she had no idea that this younger man standing before her had been holding on to a quiet certainty since he was a boy, that one day, somehow, Their paths would align in a way neither of them could predict. It wasn't until the mid-1980s that Marty Stuart and Connie Smith's paths began to truly cross in a way that mattered. By then, Marty had earned a reputation as one of country music's most versatile and charismatic performers. His time touring with Lester Flatt and later with Johnny Cash had sharpened his stage presence, and his solo career was gaining serious traction. Connie, after years away from the limelight, had returned to recording and performing, her voice as flawless as ever, and her reputation untarnished. Their first meaningful conversations happened in the natural overlap of the Nashville circuit. Green rooms, festival lineups, television appearances. Marty found himself drawn to her not just because of the voice that had first captured his attention as a boy, but because of the warmth and quiet strength she carried into every interaction. She was kind, but reserved, open, but never careless with her words. In those moments, Marty began to see beyond the star and into the person. Yet there was an undeniable barrier. 17 years separated them in age. In the image-conscious world of country music, that gap wasn't just noticeable, it was a potential scandal. For Marty, the age difference meant nothing. He saw her as an equal, someone whose life experience only deepened her beauty and wisdom. But for Connie, whose past relationships had taught her to tread carefully, it was an unignorable factor. In the beginning, their connection remained safely within the boundaries of friendship. They talked about music, faith, and the oddities of the business they both loved. Marty never pushed, but his admiration was evident in the way he listened to her, the way he remembered small details from their talks. And while Connie may not have realized it at first, those moments were planting seeds of trust. It was still years before either of them would take a step toward something more, but the foundation was being laid quietly, one backstage conversation at a time. By the early 1990s, Marty Stuart had reached a point where his feelings for Connie Smith could no longer be ignored. Years of friendship had only confirmed what he'd known since he was 12. She was the one. But for Connie, the decision to open her heart was not simple. She had lived through the turbulence of failed marriages, the challenges of raising children, and the scrutiny that came with being a woman in the spotlight. Entering a relationship with someone 17 years younger, especially someone as visible as Marty, was a risk she wasn't sure she was ready to take. Marty understood that. He didn't come charging in with declarations or demands. Instead, he showed up consistently, not just in her professional life, but in small, personal ways that mattered. He respected her boundaries, listened without judgment, and never treated their age difference as a problem to be solved. In Nashville, whispers began to swirl. Some friends and colleagues were charmed by the idea of the pairing, calling it a real-life country fairy tale. Others raised eyebrows, suggesting it wouldn't last, that Marty would one day want someone closer to his own age. But the more people talked, the more resolute Marty became. He didn't just want to prove the doubters wrong. He wanted Connie to know he was in this for life, not for headlines. Slowly, Connie's walls began to lower. She saw how Marty's actions matched his words, how he approached her not as a conquest, but as a partner. Their friendship shifted into something deeper, something they both guarded fiercely from the public eye. When they were together, it wasn't about celebrity or career. It was about two people who found joy in each other's company. And though the outside world speculated and assumed, neither Marty nor Connie felt the need to explain themselves. They knew what they had was real, and for now, that was enough. When the moment finally came for Marty Stuart to propose to Connie Smith, it wasn't the kind of over-the-top gesture people might expect from a country star. There was no grand stage, no flashing lights, no audience to witness it, because Marty knew Connie didn't want any of that. What she valued was sincerity, and that's exactly what he gave her. After years of friendship, patience, and a slow-burning romance that had defied every prediction, Marty asked Connie to be his wife in a quiet, personal way that made her feel safe, understood, and loved. On July 8, 1997, they exchanged vows in a private ceremony, far from the eyes of curious reporters and gossip columns. Only their closest friends and family were there to witness the moment. But in Nashville, the news spread fast. People were shocked, delighted, and, in some cases, still skeptical. For Marty, The wedding wasn't just a celebration of their love, it was the fulfillment of a promise he'd made to himself as a boy backstage at the Opry. For Connie, it was the start of a new chapter, with a partner she could trust completely. Their union wasn't about status or career, it was about shared values, mutual respect, and a bond that had already proven its strength long before the marriage license was signed. In the weeks after, they didn't rush to do magazine covers or television interviews. Instead, they simply went back to living their lives, touring, recording, and quietly building a home together. In an industry where celebrity weddings often became media spectacles, Marty and Connie's approach was almost radical. Keep it private, keep it sacred, and keep it real. They knew their marriage would continue to attract attention, but they had already decided how to handle it. By letting the life they built speak louder than any headline. From the day they were married, Marty Stuart and Connie Smith set a tone for their relationship that was rare in the world of country music. They would be public performers, but private people. In Nashville, a city where love stories often played out under the glare of flashing cameras and gossip columns, they quietly built a marriage away from the noise. They did not overshare, they did not chase publicity, and they did not allow the opinions of others to dictate how they lived. Instead, they focused on their faith, their music, and the comfort of their home life. When they were on stage together, their connection was undeniable. Fans could see it in the way Marty looked at Connie when she sang, the way their harmonies blended, as if they were written in the same key from the start. Off stage, they were equally devoted, attending each other's shows, supporting each other's projects, and never letting the demands of the road create distance between them. While some celebrity couples became defined by drama, Marty and Connie became defined by steadiness. They were not in competition with each other. There was no jealousy over whose career was hotter or whose name was bigger on the marquee. Marty continued to expand his own musical legacy, not only through his solo work, but also by preserving and celebrating the traditions of country music. Connie, for her part, continued to record and perform, maintaining the crystal-clear voice that first made her a star. Together, they often performed at the Grand Ole Opry, where their shared history and deep respect for the institution shone through every note. In private, their life was filled with simple joys, shared meals, evenings at home, quiet moments of prayer, and long conversations about everything from songwriting to family memories. Friends who knew them personally often remarked that they seemed to truly enjoy each other's company, which is more rare than most would think. But perhaps the most remarkable part of their life together was how they handled the inevitable whispers. The age gap that had once been a favorite topic for gossip writers became less interesting over the years, largely because Marty and Connie never allowed it to define them. They didn't respond defensively, nor did they feel the need to justify their marriage. Instead, they let the decades speak for them. Years of commitment, of shared work, of laughter and companionship. By living on their own terms, they became a quiet power couple in Nashville, not because they controlled the industry, but because they showed that real love could survive and thrive under the pressures of fame. And while fans continued to wonder about the inner workings of their relationship, Marty and Connie were content to let their music and their enduring presence together tell the story without saying a word. For decades, Marty Stuart had let his love story with Connie Smith exist in the spaces between the songs, hinted at in interviews, felt in their performances, and quietly known to those closest to them. But as he reached 66 years old, something shifted. Maybe it was the perspective that comes with time. Maybe it was the realization that their story had become more than just personal. It had become an example of what lasting love can look like in an industry built on fleeting moments. Whatever the reason, Marty decided it was time to speak openly about Connie, about their journey, and about the truth that had been living quietly behind the curtain for so many years. In a rare, unguarded interview, Marty began to tell the story from the very beginning, how, as a boy of 12, he had stood backstage at the Grand Ole Opry and told anyone who would listen that one day he would marry Connie Smith. Most people dismissed it as a child's innocent crush, a fantasy no different from a kid declaring they'd one day play in the Super Bowl. But Marty never let go of that vision. He spoke about the years in between, how life took them in different directions, how he worked his way up in the music world without ever imagining he'd be on equal professional footing with her, and how fate brought them back into each other's lives at just the right time. He acknowledged the challenges they faced, the scrutiny, the age gap, the skepticism, and how those things could have easily torn them apart if their foundation hadn't been built on mutual respect and friendship first. Marty's words weren't dramatic confessions or tabloid-ready bombshells. They were steady, heartfelt reflections from a man who had lived enough life to know what truly matters. He described Connie as not only the love of his life, but also his greatest inspiration, someone whose character, faith, and artistry had shaped him as a man and as a musician. He talked about how their marriage had been strengthened by the decision to keep it theirs, not the public's, not the industry's, not for the approval of fans or critics. And he admitted that, even after more than 2 decades together, he still looked at her the same way he did that first night at the Opry, with admiration, awe, and gratitude. For fans, hearing Marty speak so openly was like finally hearing the final verse of a song they'd been humming for years. It filled in the blanks, confirmed the whispers, and gave their love story the weight and beauty it deserved. And for Marty, it was a chance to put into words what his music had been saying all along, that true love doesn't just happen, it's built, it's protected, and if you're lucky, it lasts a lifetime. Today, Marty Stuart and Connie Smith stand as living proof that love can endure not only the trials of life, but also the relentless pressures of fame. Their marriage has outlasted industry trends, gossip cycles, and the skepticism that once followed them like a shadow. In a business where relationships often flare bright and burn out fast, they've built something steady, grounded, and almost old-fashioned in its commitment. Fans see them together, and don't just think of music. They think of loyalty, patience, and faith. They think of two people who, despite the odds, found exactly what they were looking for in each other. For Marty, being with Connie wasn't just about fulfilling a childhood dream, it became about building a life with someone who matched his values, his passions, and his belief in doing things for the right reason. For Connie, it meant opening her heart again after past heartaches and trusting that this man, despite being nearly 2 decades younger, was the partner she had been meant to find all along. Their story is not the kind of whirlwind romance that Hollywood likes to write. It's quieter, deeper, and more enduring. It's about choosing each other every single day, through the highs of awards shows and sold-out tours, and through the lows of personal struggles and the inevitable changes that time brings. They've learned to balance the demands of 2 careers without letting the spotlight consume their home life. They've made faith a cornerstone of their relationship, leaning on it to guide their decisions and keep them grounded when fame could have easily pulled them apart. And perhaps most importantly, they've kept a sense of humor, laughter flowing easily between them even when life is far from perfect. When Marty recently spoke more openly about Connie, fans finally heard in his own words what they'd always sensed in his songs, that she wasn't just an influence or a muse, she was the center of his world. He called their life together the greatest song I'll ever be a part of, a line that perfectly captures the poetic truth of their bond. In an age when so much is fleeting, the enduring love between Marty Stuart and Connie Smith feels almost radical. It reminds us that sometimes the best stories aren't the ones filled with twists and scandal. They're the ones where 2 people quietly build a life that lasts. And for the boy who once stood backstage at the Opry dreaming an impossible dream, and the woman who once thought love might not find her again, this is that rare story where the ending is every bit as beautiful as the beginning, and it's still being written.